The black belts laughed at the janitor, certain she was no threat. "Hey, mop lady, want to show us a move?" shouted Kyle Turner, his black belt glinting under the gym lights. Elena Kovac paused, broom in hand, her eyes calm but unreadable. At 30, she had worked quietly as the gym's janitor for months, cleaning floors after classes ended, always unnoticed. But that Wednesday evening, the advanced training had run late, and Kyle's arrogance filled the room. "I bet you've never even sparred in your life," he jeered. The students chuckled nervously, some uneasy. What none of them realized was that Elena had once been Elena Iron Fist Kovac, a legendary world boxing champion, and that beneath her silence lay a force they were about to awaken. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. Some scars are worn in silence, until someone mocks them loud enough to wake the past. The gym smelled of old sweat and leather. Heavy bags swung gently on their chains. In the far corner, a woman in a gray janitor's uniform pushed a mop across the floor. She moved slowly, her sleeves rolled up just enough to show strong forearms. Nobody paid her much attention at first. At the center of the mat stood 3 young men in black karate belts, their voices cutting across the hum of skipping ropes. They were not cruel in the way of villains, but careless in the way of men who had not yet learned silence. "Careful with that mop," one of them said, grinning. His name was Marcus, tall, with slick black hair tied back. His crisp GI was spotless. "Floor's slippery enough already. Wouldn't want you to break a hip." The other 2 laughed, the kind of laugh that asks for an audience. Students on nearby benches glanced over. A few smiled uncomfortably. Most simply looked away. The janitor said nothing. She kept mopping, steady strokes, eyes lowered. The bucket creaked as she dipped the mop back into the water. "She's here more than anyone," another black belt said, adjusting his belt with exaggerated ceremony. "Maybe she's training to clean faster." More laughter. The mop slid across the floor with a quiet rhythm. Her silence unsettled some. To others, it only made her an easier target. "Hey," Marcus called again. "Do they even pay you enough for this? Or is the smell of sweat your reward?" This time she paused. Not for long. Just long enough for one of the students at the bench to notice the way her shoulders stiffened, then eased. Her hand gripped the mop handle with quiet strength before she went back to work. Her name was Elena, though none of them bothered to ask. She was 30 years old, hair tied back neatly, dark eyes calm but unreadable. She had been working here for only a few months. To most of the gym's members, she was invisible. The black belts carried on, boasting about tournaments, about trophies. Their voices filled the room, loud, confident, sure of themselves. Elena rinsed the mop one last time and looked up briefly. Just a glance, no more. But in that instant, the laughter faltered. Something about the stillness in her eyes. Something most missed, but not all. Then she looked down again, silent, and kept mopping. The gym settled back into its rhythm, but a faint unease lingered, like a note held too long on a piano. And with that silence, the story had only just begun. The evening grew heavier with noise. Gloves slapped against pads. Someone shouted counts in the far ring. Yet the air near the benches stayed close, as though the mocking laughter had left a shadow that wouldn't move. Marcus wasn't done. He liked being watched. He walked toward Elena, tugging at the sleeves of his GI, chin raised. His 2 friends followed a step behind, their belts swaying with every stride. "You've got strong arms for a mop," he said, standing just a little too close. "Ever think of joining a real class?" He gestured toward the mat. "Maybe you could spar with the kids group." A few chuckles scattered around the room. Some of the younger students glanced at Elena, then quickly looked down. Elena leaned the mop against the wall. She straightened slowly, wiped her palms on her uniform. She did not answer. She did not even meet his eyes. She simply turned, lifted the bucket, and began to wheel it away. The silence of her retreat seemed to sting worse than words. "Too good to answer," one of Marcus's friends called. His voice was sharper now, eager for control. "Don't ignore your betters." Marcus stepped in front of her path. His shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Finally, Elena looked up, just for a moment. Her gaze was calm, empty of fear. It wasn't defiance. It was something else, something quieter, heavier, like a stone that cannot be moved. Marcus's grin wavered. Only slightly. He covered it with a smirk and leaned back. Guess she's mute, he said, stepping aside. Elena walked past, the wheels of her bucket whispering across the floor. Most in the gym turned away again, but one or two kept watching. A woman near the entrance frowned faintly, uneasy. A young man sitting cross-legged on the bench studied the lines of Elena's face. The three black belts went back to the mat, laughing louder than before, though their voices held a strain that hadn't been there earlier. They tried to shake off the stillness of her eyes, but it clung like a cold draft. On the far side of the gym, Elena set her bucket down and rested her hands against the handle. For just a second, she closed her eyes. The hum of the gym dulled around her. When she opened them again, the faint scar near her temple caught the fluorescent light. A small mark. Easy to miss. But it was there, and someone had noticed. The woman near the entrance shifted in her chair. Her name was Ruth, 58, a retired schoolteacher who came to watch her grandson train. She had seen many kinds of people pass through this gym. Yet something in Elena's stillness drew her eyes back again and again. She remembered the scar. Not deep, not jagged, but the kind that did not come from accidents in kitchens or gardens. It was deliberate, placed there by life in harder places. Elena picked up the mop again and moved with quiet care. Her posture was precise, almost formal. She did not drag her feet. Every motion was measured, as if she still walked under someone's instruction. On the mat, Marcus clapped his hands, calling for attention. "Watch closely," he said to the group of teenagers sitting cross-legged along the wall. "This is how a real fighter moves. Not like some others we've seen tonight." His friends chuckled. The students gave polite laughter, though their eyes flickered briefly toward the corner where Elena worked. Elena did not react. She dipped the mop, wrung it, and began again. Her shoulders stayed square, her breathing steady. The mockery did not change the rhythm of her work. But Ruth noticed. The silence of her non-reaction had a weight to it, like the quiet in a church after the last hymn. From the far side, a younger student, Daniel, 19, white belt, leaned toward his friend. "Why don't they just leave her alone?" he whispered. His voice was low, but Ruth caught it. His friend shrugged. "She's just the janitor. Maybe they're bored." The words settled like ash. Elena bent slightly, wrung the mop once more. As she straightened, her sleeve slipped, revealing a faint tattoo just above her wrist. Black ink, faded with time. A small boxing glove, outlined simply. It was there for only a second before the sleeve fell back. Ruth blinked. Her mind searched. She had seen something like that before. Years ago, in a magazine her late husband used to keep by the bedside. Elena kept working, unaware of Ruth's growing stillness. On the mat, Marcus called for one of his friends to spar. Their movements filled the gym with the sound of thuds and sharp breaths. The crowd's attention returned to the center. Yet Ruth's eyes stayed fixed on Elena's arm. And for the first time that evening, she wondered who this janitor really was. The sparring match on the mat grew louder. Kicks snapped against pads. Marcus barked instructions as if he were already a master. Yet Ruth's eyes remained on Elena. The mop traced long strokes across the floor, each motion calm, each turn deliberate. It wasn't just cleaning. It was rhythm, precision, the kind that comes from years of repeating movements until they live inside the body. Ruth leaned forward in her chair. She had been a teacher long enough to recognize patterns. Elena's shoulders rolled easily, her weight shifted with balance, and even the way she stepped backward seemed intentional. It reminded her of the rhythm of boxers she had once seen training when she was young. The scar, the tattoo, the stance. Pieces of a puzzle began to press against one another. "Your turn," Marcus called to another black belt. "Show them what real speed looks like." He darted across the mat, light on his feet, showy with his hands. The students clapped half-heartedly. In the corner, Elena wrung out the mop, the water dripping back into the bucket. Her hands were steady, her face calm. Only her eyes, dark, fixed for a second too long on the sparring, betrayed a flicker of something deeper. Then, just as quickly, the look vanished. She set the mop aside and reached for a folded rag on the cart. She knelt, pressing it against a scuff mark on the floor. Her movement was smooth, grounded. The gym's fluorescent light caught her profile. For a heartbeat, her presence filled more space than a janitor's should. Ruth's breath caught. She remembered. The magazine cover in her husband's drawer. A young woman, gloves raised, eyes calm and fierce. Elena Reyes, world lightweight champion, almost 10 years ago. The girl who had vanished from the sport without explanation. Ruth's hand trembled against her purse. She whispered to herself, "It can't be." But even as she doubted, she knew. The noise of the gym carried on, but Ruth no longer heard it. She saw only the quiet woman cleaning the floor, shoulders steady, silence holding more history than anyone around her could imagine. Elena stood, folding the rag neatly over the cart's edge. She looked across the room once more, her eyes brushing over Marcus and his friends, then lowering again. The crowd clapped for the spar. Marcus bowed theatrically, but Ruth's gaze did not shift, because now she knew. And soon, others would begin to see it too. The sound of sparring filled the room once more. Gloves smacked, feet shuffled. Yet the mood had shifted. The laughter from earlier no longer rang with the same easy confidence. It carried an edge, a nervous strain. Ruth adjusted her scarf and leaned forward on her chair, her gaze steady on Elena. She was not alone anymore. Daniel, the 19-year-old beginner, sat with his hands folded, trying not to be obvious as he too kept looking at the quiet janitor in the corner. Marcus strutted across the mat, throwing punches into the air with exaggerated force. His voice echoed across the gym. "You see that? Speed. Precision. That's the mark of a black belt." He grinned, waiting for the applause. The students clapped politely, though none of them smiled. Elena was kneeling again, her cloth pressed to a scuff on the floor. The bucket of water beside her reflected the fluorescent lights. She worked quietly, unhurried, as though the noise of the room did not exist. Her expression remained still, her movements exact. But her silence was no longer invisible. It was becoming impossible to ignore. One of Marcus's friends, David, shorter, stocky, his belt tied a little too tight, pointed toward Elena. "Hey," he called, "you watching? You might learn something about balance if you're paying attention." He laughed, but it was forced, missing the easy cruelty from before. Elena did not lift her head. She brushed the cloth across the floor once more, then folded it neatly on the edge of the cart. Ruth's fingers tightened against her purse. There was strength in that silence, a depth that unsettled her. She glanced around. Others were noticing too, though no one spoke it aloud. Daniel shifted on the bench. "She doesn't move like a janitor," he whispered again, this time to himself. His eyes caught Elena's posture, the way she kept her back straight, knees steady, balance never faltering even as she crouched. Marcus barked another laugh. He beckoned to the teenagers. "Come on, don't just sit there like statues. Give us some energy. You're in a gym, not a library." His grin spread wide, but the crowd responded with weak smiles. The room no longer belonged to him the way it had at first. Across the mats, Elena stood, lifting the mop once more. She turned, moving along the far edge of the gym. Her eyes briefly swept across the black belts. Calm, silent, then down again. Ruth's heart pounded with recognition. She knew she was not imagining it. This woman carried history in her very stance. And now, others were beginning to feel it too. The evening class pressed on, but the air in the gym had grown unsettled. Where earlier laughter had filled the space, now there was a ripple of unease. It was small, but it spread. Elena's mop slid quietly across the floor, steady and measured. She moved without hurry, without hesitation, as though each step had been rehearsed. Students near the benches found their eyes drifting back to her, then quickly turning away when Marcus's voice rose above the rhythm of training. "Line up," Marcus called, clapping his hands together. His GI was soaked with sweat now, his chest heaving. His friends flanked him, nodding as if to mirror his authority. The younger students scrambled into 2 rows, facing the mat. Some of them exchanged looks, uncertain whether to laugh along or remain quiet. A faint tension coiled in their shoulders. "Remember," Marcus said, pacing in front of them, "discipline isn't just about technique. It's about knowing your place. Respect. Order. Everyone has a role. Fighters fight. Students learn. And others," his eyes slid toward Elena, who was bent over her mop. "Well, others keep the place clean." A few chuckles escaped from the older students, but the sound didn't carry as before. It faltered halfway, as though swallowed by the room. Ruth pressed her lips together, her gaze fixed on Elena. She noticed the way the young woman paused just slightly, her hand tightening on the handle of the mop. For a breath, Elena's shoulders straightened in a way that seemed practiced, almost drilled. Then she resumed her rhythm as if nothing had been said. But Ruth saw it. Daniel saw it too. And now, a few others had begun to notice. David, the shorter black belt, leaned toward Marcus with a smirk. Think she even understands you? Or is she just deaf to respect? His words carried louder than he meant them to. This time, a couple of parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them cleared his throat softly. The sound broke against the silence, but made no difference. Elena reached the far wall. She set the mop carefully against the bucket and rested her hands against the handle. She stood still for a moment, eyes lowered, before lifting her gaze briefly toward the mat. The scar near her temple caught the light again, glinting faintly before disappearing back into shadow. The room's unease deepened. It was not yet opened out, but it was there, and though no one spoke it aloud, the crowd was beginning to feel that this janitor carried something none of them understood. The gym carried on, but quieter now. Even the sound of punches on pads seemed less sharp, as if muffled by something heavier in the air. Elena leaned her mop against the wall and moved toward a stack of folded towels near the storage room. She lifted them with ease, her arms strong, her grip firm. As she walked, her steps were balanced, grounded. She didn't sway or shuffle. Her center of gravity stayed low, steady, exactly as fighters were taught to move. Ruth noticed again. She could not look away. Elena placed the towels on a bench and knelt to wipe the sweat that had gathered along the frame of a heavy bag. Her hands moved in slow circles, patient, careful, but her mind was not in that gym anymore. For a moment, she saw something else. A dim garage, lit only by a single hanging bulb. The smell of oil and chalk. Her father's voice, deep, patient, steady. Again, he said, balance first, then the punch. Without balance, you have nothing. She was 13, smaller than the bag, fists wrapped in cloth because gloves were too expensive at the time. Her father stood behind her, one hand guiding her shoulder, the other steady on her wrist. Breathe. Again. The sound of leather striking leather. Again. Again. Elena blinked. The memory faded. The gym returned. She pressed the cloth harder against the bag, as though anchoring herself back into the present. Her face betrayed nothing. Only her eyes held the echo of something long past. Daniel shifted uneasily on the bench. He had been watching her without meaning to. He couldn't explain it, but something about the way she carried herself reminded him of the videos he watched online late at night. Old fights. Champions moving like water. Marcus clapped again, his voice breaking the stillness. Focus, everyone. Don't stare at distractions. Eyes on the mat. He glanced toward Elena as he spoke. His smirk had returned, though it faltered for just a second when she looked up at him without a word. Ruth exhaled slowly, almost a whisper. She remembered her late husband's voice, flipping through magazines on Sunday mornings. That girl is going to change the sport. Look at her footwork. She's a natural. He had pointed to a photograph. Elena Reyes, fists raised, the youngest lightweight champion of her era. Now here she was, in a janitor's uniform, wiping sweat from a bag. The silence around her deepened. The crowd was starting to sense that this was no ordinary woman. The towels stacked neatly, the mop resting quiet. The noise of the gym stretched on, grunts, thuds, sharp calls of instruction, but Elena's world felt far away. Her hand brushed absently against her temple. The scar was faint, but it carried a memory that never faded. A different room, a brighter night, crowds roaring, camera lights flashing. She was 21 then, standing beneath the harsh glare of a boxing ring. Her gloves heavy, her chest burning with effort. Across from her, an opponent far taller, older, favored to win. And yet she remembered her father's words. Balance first. Then the punch. The bell rang. She stepped forward, light on her feet, breath steady. Her opponent lunged. Elena slipped, countered, her gloves snapping through air with perfect timing. The crowd's roar shook her bones. She had won that night. World champion, youngest in her class. Her father's arms lifted her high, his laughter deep with pride. But memory is cruel. The sound of his laugh faded, replaced by hospital monitors. The quiet hum of machines. His breath slowing, his hands pale and cold. A life of service, of sacrifice, ended too soon. He had been a soldier before he was her trainer. He carried scars of his own, not all visible. Elena had sworn to honor him by fighting with discipline, not ego. And when he was gone, so was her fire. She walked away from the lights, walked away from the noise. No press conference, no farewell match. Just silence. Silence that had followed her ever since. Back in the gym, she pressed the rag firmly against the bag, breathing slowly through her nose. Her face betrayed nothing, but inside the ache stirred, as fresh as the day it began. Ruth shifted again in her chair, her brow furrowed. She saw the weight in Elena's silence. She saw the grief behind her steady movements. Her late husband's words echoed in her memory. Some fighters don't just fight opponents. They fight the world. And when the world gets too heavy, they vanish. Marcus clapped his hands again, louder this time, desperate to hold the room. Eyes here, he barked. Focus. Discipline. But his voice carried less command than before. Several of the students looked not at him, but at the woman in gray, standing quietly beside the heavy bag. Daniel whispered to himself, almost reverent, "She's someone." And though no one yet spoke aloud, the silence in the gym was no longer indifference. It was the first stirring of recognition. The rhythm of the gym grew uneven. Where once the students had followed Marcus with obedient energy, now their focus wavered. Their eyes strayed toward the woman in gray, whose silence pulled at them like gravity. Elena lifted the bucket, carrying it with one hand. The weight should have strained her, but her grip was firm, her stride steady. She moved as though she had done harder things, carried heavier burdens. She set it down by the far wall, the water sloshing quietly, then reached for a fresh cloth. Marcus noticed. His smirk tightened. He slapped his hands together again. Stay sharp. His voice was hard now, less playful. He was beginning to sense his audience slipping. Ruth leaned back in her chair, her heart beating faster. The puzzle in her memory was nearly complete. She recalled late nights with her husband, the magazine spreads and taped matches. The tattoo, the scar, the balance in every step. She hadn't said the name aloud yet, but it hovered at the edge of her lips. Elena bent to pick up a fallen focus mitt that one of the younger students had dropped. She didn't toss it back carelessly. She held it properly, thumb tucked, wrist straight, as if even that simple gesture carried respect. Her movements betrayed her training. Daniel caught it. His eyes widened. That's not random, he muttered under his breath. She knows. The student, she handed the mitt to, looked up at her and froze. He saw the calm in her gaze, the way her hand steadied his for a moment before she let go. His throat tightened, though he didn't know why. Elena turned back to her cart, rolling it slowly along the wall. Her expression remained unreadable, yet the room around her grew heavier. One of Marcus's friends whispered too loudly. She creeps me out. Always watching. His attempt at humor landed flat. Nobody laughed. Ruth pressed a hand to her chest. The memories were clear now. An old article. Elena standing in a ring with her father at her side, gloves raised, eyes calm even in victory. The headline read, "The Silent Storm." But Ruth stayed quiet. She knew the time was not yet right. Elena paused near the wall, her gaze briefly rising to meet Marcus's across the mat. The contact lasted only a second, but in that second, something passed between them, an unspoken weight that left Marcus unsettled. The crowd shifted uneasily. They did not yet know her name, but they knew, finally, that she was not who she appeared to be. The gym had fallen into a low murmur. Students moved with hesitation now, their exercises half-hearted, eyes darting toward Elena as she worked quietly. Marcus tapped his gloves against one another, attempting to regain control. "Let's run some drills," he barked, voice a notch sharper. "I want focus. Eyes here." Elena turned slightly toward the center of the room, not to answer him, but to position herself near a punching bag that had tipped slightly. With a precise step, she nudged it back upright, almost imperceptibly, yet perfectly balanced. The movement was fluid, economical, enough to catch the attention of anyone watching carefully. Daniel, leaning against a bench, whispered to Ruth, "Did you see that? That wasn't casual. That was trained." Ruth's lips pressed together. She had seen her husband describe that motion long ago, a fighter's balance, their awareness extending beyond their own body, beyond the immediate fight. Every gesture purposeful, even mundane ones. Marcus, oblivious, demonstrated a drill for his students. He swung pads for a pair of beginners, exaggerating his movements to command attention. But as he glanced at Elena, His rhythm faltered. He didn't want to admit it, but the room had shifted. Something silent, profound, was pressing down on them. Elena wiped a spot of sweat from a bag. Her hands, scarred slightly at the knuckles, moved with steady efficiency. She adjusted a rope tied loosely around a post, her fingers working as if tuning a string instrument. Each action precise, controlled. Ruth's gaze lingered on her. She remembered the young girl in a dim garage, gloves too small, trying to find the center of her balance. She remembered the ring lights, the roar of the crowd, her father guiding her hand. That same control, that same poise, had not left Elena. A student tripped near the mats. Elena's reflexes were instant, but understated. She reached out, steadying him with a single hand, correcting his stance. Not a word, not a gesture of superiority, just balance restored, movement corrected. For the first time, murmurs rippled among the students. Heads tilted, eyes widened. The tension in the room thickened. Marcus caught a glance at her and felt a twinge of uncertainty, a tiny crack in his armor. Daniel leaned forward. She's incredible. You don't just learn that by cleaning floors. Ruth exhaled slowly, a quiet smile touching her lips. The first seed of recognition had taken root in the gym. Elena stepped back, returning the mitts to their rack. Her presence alone had shifted the energy, without a word, without a show. The room felt smaller, heavier, as if acknowledging her history silently. And for a moment, the gym stopped moving, not out of fear, but out of awe. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had tried to command the room, but his authority was slipping like sand through his fingers. The students were no longer following his rhythm. Their eyes kept drifting toward Elena. He slammed a pad against the mat with force. Enough. His voice cut sharper than ever. Everyone, circle up. The room shifted reluctantly. Students formed a loose semicircle, the tension heavy in the air. Marcus's eyes flicked to Elena, narrowing. And you, he said, pointing at her. You think you're part of this? Elena's head tilted slightly, calm, her gray uniform neat despite the sweat. She didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. The pause stretched long enough to make Marcus fidget slightly. You clean here, Marcus continued, his tone low, a mix of irritation and disbelief. You're not part of this class. You don't belong on this mat. Elena's hand brushed the dog tags around her neck. She had worn them every day since her father's passing, a quiet reminder of her roots and her discipline. She kept them tucked under her shirt usually, but today, the chain glinted in the gym light. I don't want to belong, she said softly, almost to herself. I want fairness. Marcus laughed, but it was forced, brittle. Fairness? You? You're. He stopped mid-sentence as Elena stepped forward, just slightly, weight centered, posture perfect. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't threatening, but it was undeniable. Her presence shifted the room again. The students noticed, the way she occupied the space, silent yet commanding. Even the air seemed to settle differently around her. Marcus's smirk faltered. He glanced at the students and saw their hesitation. Their doubt was a mirror, reflecting back at him. He had challenged the wrong person. Elena's gaze met his, steady, calm. If you want this, she said quietly, we do it right. One-on-one. No crowding. No cheating. When we're done, you'll apologize. Otherwise, leave. The gym went silent. Her words were simple, minimal, yet carried an undeniable weight. Every student in the circle felt it. Even Marcus paused, stunned by the quiet authority that radiated from a woman he had thought he could dismiss. Daniel and Ruth exchanged glances. Ruth's fingers tightened around the edge of her notebook. She recognized the tone. That same tone she had seen on her husband, in her father. It was the tone of someone who had fought battles that mattered, and had mastered herself first. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. The energy in the room was thick with anticipation. He was about to make a choice he hadn't expected to face. The students watched, breath held. The air itself seemed to hum with tension, the calm before a storm they all sensed but had yet to see. And Elena, silent and steady, waited. Marcus's fists clenched at his sides. He had been the one in control all morning, but now the balance had shifted, imperceptibly yet undeniably. The room had quieted, the usual chatter of mats and gloves replaced by a taut, almost sacred tension. Elena remained centered. Her breathing was slow, measured, almost meditative. The dog tags under her uniform glinted again as she adjusted her stance. She wasn't posturing. She didn't need to. The presence she carried said more than words ever could. Marcus stepped forward, testing. He feigned a jab at an empty space, a rehearsal for what he assumed would be a show of dominance. Elena shifted slightly, weight grounded, hands at her sides, and yet she moved with the precision of someone who had anticipated every motion before it happened. A low murmur ran through the circle of students. Daniel, near the edge of the semicircle, leaned in. She doesn't just react, he whispered to Ruth. She anticipates every move. It's like she's reading the fight before it happens. Ruth's eyes narrowed. She had trained alongside Elena for years, and still, there was a gravity here she hadn't fully recognized. That quiet power, the way Elena occupied space without aggression, was almost reverent. Marcus, growing impatient, stepped closer. You think you can, he began, but paused. His words faltered under the weight of her stillness. Elena's gaze met his, calm yet unyielding. She said nothing, yet the challenge was clear. Continue, or step aside. One student, timid but aware, muttered, "She's something else." Heads nodded subtly around him. The room's skepticism was cracking. The very air seemed to hum with the knowledge that Marcus was no longer the dominant force here. Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "We do this properly. One round. No tricks. No interruptions. When it's over, fairness is restored." Marcus's smirk had vanished. His students were watching. His authority was slipping in real time. He took a deep breath, the kind fighters take before a known storm. He nodded curtly. "Fine. One round. Let's get it over with." The semicircle tightened instinctively. Students leaned forward on toes, eyes wide. Some clutched gloves. Others stayed frozen, not daring to blink. Daniel exhaled slowly. This isn't about cleaning floors or belts," he whispered. "She's something else entirely." The tension coiled tighter. The gym felt smaller, denser. Marcus squared himself, fists raised, but every movement now carried hesitation. Elena's presence had already rewritten the rules. Ruth's hand brushed the corner of her notebook. She caught sight of the photograph tucked inside. Elena, younger, in the ring, gloves high, eyes fierce. It was a memory of a world these students hadn't seen, and a clue of what was about to unfold. The room held its breath. The first real confrontation was about to begin. The room seemed to shrink. Every echo of a footstep, every scrape of a mat, resonated with sudden clarity. Marcus shifted his weight, testing the air, trying to assert dominance, but something in Elena's calm presence muted his confidence. She bent slightly, adjusting her stance. Not rigid, not aggressive, but precise. Every movement measured, deliberate. Her eyes scanned the room, not the students, not Marcus, only the space between. A bead of sweat ran down Marcus's temple. He noticed it, though Elena did not flinch, did not blink. She simply waited, her breathing smooth and deep. The dog tags at her chest swung gently, catching the gym light. They were more than metal. They were a quiet pulse of history, of discipline, of battles fought far from this floor. Daniel edged closer to Ruth. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. "It's like the air changed. Like something old, something serious." Ruth nodded, sensing it herself. She had trained with Elena before, but this moment was different. Elena's presence commanded, not with volume, but with weight. The students instinctively leaned back, giving her space, even though they didn't know why. Marcus finally inhaled and exhaled, trying to clear his mind. He moved his fists into position, but it was slower than usual, heavier. He glanced at the circle of students. Their gazes were fixed, curious but tense. Doubt flickered in their eyes, unspoken but potent. Elena tilted her head slightly. In that simple gesture, she conveyed readiness, confidence, and absolute control. She wasn't inviting a fight. She wasn't seeking attention. She simply was. The seconds stretched. The hum of the gym equipment, the low thud of a ball in the corner, became background. Time slowed. Every small movement seemed amplified. Marcus's shoulders tightened, his jaw ached. He was about to step into something he could not control. Ruth's eyes drifted to the corner of her notebook again. She touched the photograph tucked inside. Elena, younger, in the ring, gloves raised, a championship belt hanging behind her. She'd seen that photo before, But now, in this charged quiet, it felt like a warning. Elena's gaze locked with Marcus's. There was no smirk, no taunt, just presence, control, history, discipline. Daniel exhaled softly. She's going to. He stopped mid-thought, understanding instantly. Whatever happened next would not be about force. It would be about mastery, precision, and experience. Marcus raised his fists again, more cautiously this time. Elena shifted her weight, subtle, a silent preparation. The semicircle of students held their breath. The gym seemed suspended in time. Elena's shadow stretched across the mat. Her stance, calm and centered, spoke louder than any shout could. And then, with a small, almost imperceptible step forward, she began. Elena shifted her weight slightly to the left. Not a step, not a lunge, just a subtle adjustment, almost imperceptible. Yet Marcus noticed. His eyes flicked, a hint of uncertainty surfacing. That small motion carried authority, a silent message. I am ready. I have always been ready. Daniel's fingers twitched at his side. He hadn't realized it until this moment. The way Elena's posture could make a grown man hesitate. Ruth's breath was slow, deliberate, as though she were holding herself in rhythm with Elena. The gym was no longer a place of casual practice. It had become a stage for history quietly waiting to reveal itself. Marcus squared himself, fists up, jaw tight. He had faced skilled opponents before, but there was a difference here. Elena moved with calm patience, her gaze steady, like a lighthouse in the fog. She didn't need to speak. Every muscle, every breath, every slight tilt of her shoulder communicated discipline honed over years. The students around the mat leaned forward. Not all of them understood, but instinct told them to watch closely. Something extraordinary was about to unfold. Even the janitorial staff, standing near the lockers with brooms forgotten in their hands, felt the weight of the moment. Elena's eyes flicked toward the old photograph again, the one tucked in Ruth's notebook, a silent memory. It reminded her of the quiet training hours, the inherited legacy, the losses endured. She carried it not as pride, but as a compass, guiding her through every challenge. Marcus took a cautious step forward. Elena mirrored the movement subtly, almost as if she were aware of his intent before it existed. The dog tags on her chest brushed against each other, a soft metallic whisper. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat of history, of battles fought far from public attention. Ruth swallowed hard. She's calculating, she murmured. Not reacting. Predicting. Daniel nodded, his eyes widening. I can't tell what she'll do, but whatever it is, it's going to be exact. Marcus paused mid-step, sensing the shift. His confidence was eroding, replaced by an unfamiliar tension. He glanced around at the students' faces. Their usual bravado was gone. They were quiet, alert, and unsettled. Elena's hands remained low, relaxed. Yet every movement suggested readiness, a calm force that could erupt with precision at any moment. She exuded a presence that demanded attention without words or motion. The semicircle tightened, the air thick with expectation. No one moved. No one spoke. Only Elena and Marcus stood on the mat, silent, poised. Then, in the briefest flicker of time, Elena shifted her stance completely, grounding herself. Her eyes locked on Marcus's. The gym seemed to exhale as if waiting. Everything had slowed. The moment of truth was near. Elena's feet found their mark on the mat. Not rushed, not forced, just precise. The subtle shift anchored her. Marcus's fists rose slightly higher, tension rippling through his shoulders. He could feel it now, the gravity of her presence pressing in on him. Daniel leaned closer to Ruth, whispering under his breath. She's about to move. I don't know how, but I can feel it in my bones. Ruth nodded, keeping her eyes locked on Elena. Each breath, each micro-adjustment of her posture, hinted at something far beyond ordinary skill. The students instinctively leaned back, murmurs stifled in their throats. Even Marcus's allies paused. There was a hesitation in the air, like stepping into a room where history quietly lingered, unseen yet undeniable. Elena's gaze swept over the gym, measuring distances, angles, and reactions. Her eyes were steady, unwavering, but they carried stories untold. The early mornings, the injuries endured, the victories that had left scars both visible and invisible. Every line of her body was honed discipline, a silent promise that she could act with deadly precision if needed. but not recklessly, never without purpose. A small bead of sweat ran down Marcus's temple. He blinked. Elena's subtle movements, the tilt of her head, the careful balance of her weight, suggested patience, but beneath it was the quiet warning of lethal experience. Marcus felt it instinctively. Misstep, and the outcome would be disastrous. The dog tags at Elena's chest swung once, then hung still, catching the harsh gym light. The metallic sound was soft, almost a whisper, yet it resonated through the silence. It was a rhythm of history, of battles fought and won in quiet corners far from applause. Daniel's voice was barely audible. She's in control. Completely. Ruth felt the same chill, a mixture of awe and anticipation. The students watched, understanding finally that the woman before them was not simply a janitor, not simply a quiet presence. Something extraordinary was contained in her stillness. Marcus inhaled sharply, trying to steel himself, but Elena did not rush him. She merely stood, fully aware, fully grounded. Her shadow stretched across the mat, a subtle reminder of the weight she carried silently. Then she shifted again, just slightly, but it was enough. Enough to unbalance Marcus mentally, to sow hesitation in his body. Every inch she moved communicated calm, control, and readiness. Ruth's hand brushed the photograph in her notebook. Elena had been a champion once, far more than anyone in this room realized. And in this quiet moment, that truth began to settle into the minds of all who watched. The tension broke not in violence, but in recognition. Marcus froze. The students leaned forward, barely breathing. The gym had become a cathedral of expectation. Elena's stance, her presence, her history, all converged silently, demanding respect without a single word. Marcus's shoulders tightened. He realized fully, if only for a heartbeat, that this was no ordinary confrontation. Elena exhaled, a simple, controlled breath. Time seemed to pause. Elena took a step forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. The gym seemed to hold its breath with her. Marcus mirrored the movement, fists clenched tighter, chest rising in shallow breaths. Every eye in the room was locked on her now. Her gaze never wavered. Calm, measured, yet carrying the weight of battles unseen. The dog tags brushed against her chest, catching the overhead lights for a fleeting second, glinting like quiet metals of history. Students shifted uneasily. Even the janitors leaned closer, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Marcus swung first, an overconfident jab meant to intimidate. Elena moved, subtly shifting her weight. He missed by a hair. A small pause, barely noticeable, and she was already resetting. Her movements were precise, economical, and almost imperceptible. Ruth's breath caught. She could see it now, the way Elena's body reacted before Marcus's fist even fully extended. A flicker of muscle memory, honed over years. A rhythm of instinct that went far beyond the dojo. Daniel whispered under his breath, She's not just skilled. She's beyond anything I've seen." Marcus tried again, this time more calculated. Elena blocked, sidestepped, and redirected with a subtle push. He stumbled, eyes wide. The students gasped. Their quiet disbelief was palpable. He tried to regain his composure, but every move was anticipated, every effort countered with minimal motion and maximum effect. Elena did not shout. She did not gloat. She simply responded, her presence commanding absolute respect. Each defensive action, each controlled adjustment, revealed a hidden strength. She was a master of timing, leverage, and restraint. It was not violence. It was clarity made physical. The gym was silent, save for the soft scuff of feet on mats. Marcus's confidence crumbled with each passing second. His fists hung lower. His stance faltered. The crowd, once eager for spectacle, now held only wide-eyed awe. A subtle flash, a scar on her forearm, a tightly held knuckle tape, caught Ruth's attention. Recognition sparked. The dog tags, the posture, the unspoken discipline, it all fit together. She was no ordinary janitor. She was someone with a legacy, a history of excellence and quiet resilience. Elena's calm eyes met Marcus's. No words, no threat, just presence. And in that instant, Marcus felt the truth hit him. This woman, this seemingly quiet, humble worker, was someone who had shaped the world of combat in ways he could not yet fully comprehend. A final shift of her stance, subtle, dignified, and precise, sent Marcus staggering back, mentally and physically. The room froze. Even the air seemed to pause. The revelation had begun. Marcus stumbled back, chest heaving. His mind raced, trying to rationalize what had just happened. One moment he had been certain, confident. The next, the floor beneath him felt unstable, the weight of Elena's presence pressing in. She didn't move closer. She didn't need to. Every step Marcus considered was already countered by her calm awareness. Her stance was fluid yet grounded, a living proof of balance, timing, and experience. The students whispered among themselves, barely audible. She knew before he even moved. It's like she can see him before he thinks. The murmurs spread quickly, curiosity blending with awe. Daniel's eyes never left Elena. "I've trained for years," he muttered softly, "and I've never seen anything like this." Marcus tried to strike again, desperation creeping into his movements. His punches were hurried, uncoordinated, betraying the growing fear. Elena sidestepped each one, her counters subtle, controlled, precise. Every gesture seemed minimal, yet each carried undeniable authority. A bead of sweat rolled down Marcus's temple. He blinked rapidly. For the first time, uncertainty replaced his arrogance. The crowd's perception began to shift. The same people who had laughed, who had whispered insults moments ago, now watched in stunned silence. Respect, or perhaps awe, had taken root. Ruth's hand brushed the photograph in her notebook once more. She remembered the articles, the trophies, the names she had once read in passing. Her heartbeat quickened. Recognition sparked in her eyes. Elena was not just skilled, she was a former world champion. A legend, quietly living among them. Daniel's whisper reached her ears. She's that one, isn't she? The champion." Ruth nodded subtly, her mind connecting the dots. Marcus, too, was beginning to sense the truth, though only partially. He had underestimated her entirely. Elena's eyes scanned the room, calm, unyielding. No boast, no prideful glare. Only quiet dignity. Her dog tags shifted slightly with her movement, a subtle metallic reminder of the history she carried. Every gesture, every step, reinforced that she was more than appearances suggested. Then came the final small movement. A subtle shift in her weight, almost imperceptible. Marcus's footing betrayed him. He faltered, unbalanced. The room exhaled as one, soft, collective, stunned. The realization hit him fully. He had been outclassed in every sense, not by strength alone, but by skill honed over years of discipline and sacrifice. The students, the instructors, even casual bystanders, all paused. They were witnesses now, not to a fight, but to the unveiling of true mastery. The gym had fallen silent, holding the weight of Elena's quiet power. Marcus's wide-eyed stare met Elena's. No words passed between them. The truth, her legacy, was undeniable. Time seemed to slow, and the room waited. Marcus froze, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He could feel it now, the full weight of what he had underestimated. Elena stood still, steady, composed, as if the world had narrowed to the space between them. He lunged once more, reckless, driven by panic rather than strategy. Elena's reaction was seamless, almost imperceptible. A subtle pivot of her hips, a shift of her shoulder, enough to redirect his momentum without force, without aggression. His own strength betrayed him. The room exhaled collectively, silent but charged. Every bystander leaned in, eyes wide. The whispers that had begun as curiosity had dissolved into awe. The students who had mocked her were now frozen in disbelief. Even Ruth, who had sensed the truth, held her breath. Marcus stumbled forward, off balance, caught entirely in Elena's controlled presence. She didn't strike. She didn't raise a fist. She merely guided him with the lightest of touches, a precise and dignified redirection that left him on his knees. He looked up at her then. Fear, confusion, and shame fought across his face. The realization hit him. He had been defeated, not by brute force, but by skill, by years of training, by discipline he could barely comprehend. Elena's eyes softened for a moment. No gloating, no triumph. Only a quiet, unshakable dignity. Her dog tags glinted faintly, a subtle signal of history, of legacy, of battles fought and won beyond the eyes of those around her. The silence was thick, absolute. Marcus's chest heaved. and then he lowered his head. The gym, once full of laughter at her expense, was now full of reverent stillness. The bystanders, the students, the instructors, none dared speak. All had witnessed a transformation. Ruth stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "Elena, you're the world champion." The words hung in the air, reverent, filled with understanding. The name, the recognition, crystallized what everyone had sensed but could not yet say. Marcus's gaze lifted slowly, connecting the dots. The dog tags, the scars, the calm precision. The truth was undeniable. That's Elena Kovac," he whispered, his voice trembling. Shock, respect, and humiliation mingled in his tone. No one cheered. No one mocked. The gym had shifted entirely. Elena's quiet power had reshaped it, reclaimed her dignity, and silenced the arrogance that had once filled the room. She nodded once, ever so slightly, acknowledging the recognition without pride. She stepped back, her presence still commanding, leaving Marcus kneeling, bewildered, humbled. The room slowly exhaled, the tension ebbing, replaced by a deep, reflective respect. For the first time that day, Elena allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The lesson had been delivered. The humiliation had been repaid, not with anger, but with undeniable truth. The gym remained silent, holding the gravity of her revelation, waiting for the next chapter to begin. The silence lingered, heavy, almost sacred. Marcus stayed on his knees, his palms pressed into the gym floor, feeling the reality of his misjudgment pressed down on him. The laughter, the mockery, the arrogance, it all seemed distant now, meaningless. Ruth approached cautiously, notebook in hand. She traced her fingers over the old photograph she had carried here earlier. The face matched Elena's perfectly. The eyes, the set of the jaw, the poise, the quiet, commanding presence. Recognition rippled through her. "That's Elena Kovac," she said again, louder this time, her voice steady. The room shifted, absorbing the weight of the words. Heads turned. Students whispered among themselves, astonished. "Elena Kovac, the former boxing world champion?" Someone murmured. "The one who dominated the ring for years." The gym collectively reeled, stunned into silence. Elena said nothing. She only adjusted the dog tags around her neck, letting them glint softly under the gym lights, a quiet reminder of the history she carried. Her calm gaze swept across the room, taking in the witnesses, the students, and Marcus. Marcus lifted his head, eyes wide. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by the sharp sting of humility. He could feel every punch he had thrown, every gesture he had made, replaying against the precision and grace she had displayed. He had underestimated a legend, a fighter whose legacy was built not on ego but on discipline, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. The flashbacks came unbidden. Articles in old magazines, newspaper clippings of championship bouts, photos of her father, a celebrated veteran, training her in the art of discipline and resilience. He remembered seeing her in old videos, agile, fearless, commanding respect with every movement. It all clicked, every subtle hint, every unspoken clue that had gone unnoticed until now. The gym seemed to hold its breath. Marcus lowered his gaze again, ashamed. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, a whisper, "I misjudged you." Elena's eyes softened just slightly. No anger, no harsh words, only the quiet authority of someone who had endured, who had mastered, who had reclaimed her place in the world without needing to shout it aloud. The students, too, seemed to absorb the lesson. Respect replaced derision. Murmurs of awe spread through the room like a tide. "She's incredible. I can't believe we didn't see it sooner." Even Marcus's friends, who had egged him on, looked away, embarrassed, humbled. The moment was complete. The recognition, once whispered and tentative, had become absolute. Elena straightened, the weight of her past and her legacy quietly resting in her presence. She had reclaimed not only respect, but truth. The gym no longer saw a janitor. They saw Elena Kovac, the fighter, the champion, the woman whose history had always been hers to carry. And for the first time that day, the room felt entirely still, reverent. 3 months later, the gym had changed. Elena moved quietly among the students, no longer a janitor in their eyes, but a teacher. Every motion carried calm authority, every glance a reminder of the history she held. Marcus still came by, cautious, humbled. One afternoon, he approached quietly. "Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see," he said. Elena only nodded once, her calm acknowledgement enough. No lecture, no pride, just the quiet power of someone who had endured more than anyone knew. The students, too, had changed. Mockery was gone. They watched closely, learning not only technique, but discipline, restraint, and respect. Her dog tags glinted faintly in the light, a subtle symbol of past battles and quiet triumph. Ruth recorded everything with care, capturing the lessons of someone who had mastered both skill and dignity. Above the gym equipment, a photo of Elena in her boxing prime reflected her current composure. The same fire, tempered now by years of endurance and quiet mastery. Even Marcus's friends adjusted their attitude, humbled by what they had witnessed. The lesson had spread silently. True strength does not boast. It moves calmly, with precision, and commands respect without a word. Elena paused, fingers brushing her dog tags. The humiliation, the doubt, the whispered sneers, all now part of the story she had reclaimed. She returned to her students, teaching, guiding, her presence steady, unshakable. The gym was still. Respect had replaced arrogance. Legacy had replaced underestimation. And in that quiet moment, Elena Kovac's story had found its rightful place, not in noise or spectacle, but in truth, discipline, and presence. The room held its breath, witnessing a quiet triumph that needed no announcement.